we can I can send you that as a YouTube movie. Okay.
Yes, that would be very helpful.
Okay, so looking at your program, it's clearly started off as a P6 program that you've opened as an XER. I would suspect. Hello?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, when I came here, I just recently started, and then that's a stage of program that I haven't handed over.
But the project itself looks like that started as a P6 program that's been opened in Powerproject from an XER. Is that true?
I don't know the history, but I don't think so, because the people who worked before was a very good user of Asta.
Okay, it just looks like it was anyway.
And then
but anyway, but I'm going to answer you specific questions about constraints and negative float.
Yes.
Yes. So.
Yeah. And there are a couple of other things as well, if you can.
Well, we'll see.
I mean, time-wise.
That's all I'm prepared. That's all I've prepared. Well, we'll see. We'll see what else we can do. But so you've discovered constraints in general, I assume.
Yes.
Yes. So to get negative float, we've got to have a critical activity that has got a flag that is going to cause it to need to finish earlier than it wants to. Okay, and I just want you to make sure you know the difference between a finish on flag, which personally I don't like. So a finish on flag is one that no matter what the date of it, this activity must always finish on that date regardless. So it can introduce float into the program itself, positive float, yeah, as you can see there.
Yes.
So I don't like that, because I don't think people really understand that. So obviously if you get negative float, that can also happen, but it makes this task finish on that date completely, and I personally don't like that, and I always recommend that people generally go for the finish on or before, because if that isn't connected to the activity, so it's saying you've got to finish on that date, but you could finish earlier, so that might be a contract end date, and this is the date that you're currently targeting to finish, but there's a difference. But if that date were to be less than that, it doesn't change the end date of this task. It just, if you have a total float column being displayed, it will show you the amount of negative float that every activity has. So if you reduced any critical activity by 2 days, it would bring the whole thing back on schedule. And there's a reschedule settings option that has got an impact on that, and that is negative float applies to chain. And if that option is ticked, which mine is usually by default, that means every activity on the critical path from that point backwards has got the same amount of negative float. If that is unticked, the first activity, and you've got to reschedule for that to have an effect, then the first activity, the first unprogressed activity, is the only one with negative float, and the appearance of that activity has changed. So that is 2 days shorter than it should be. So that would imply that you only need to change that one and not any of them. But of course, changing the duration of any activity on the critical path would remove that situation. So it's as simple as that.
Yeah, that's a very good suggestion. That's exactly, I didn't know that. It's very easy, rather than going through all the 100 activities. You can just mitigate 1 or 2 activities in the front end.
And so you would put a constraint flag, I would say a finish on or before flag, and that would have an effect at the point the problem happens. I'm picking up a lot of background noise at your side of it.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Because I didn't get any meeting room booked.
Yeah, yeah,
So
sure.
I'm using the lobby.
Yeah, I'm just sitting in the
area.
okay. I'm just sitting in the main office as well. So, so is there anything else you want to know on that front?
Well, you have one of the milestones. The constraint named deadline.
Yeah,
and holding pin.
Yeah. So a deadline is something else. So if you wanted to have an event that had a deadline flag, a deadline is a warning that date will be exceeded. Okay. So if you reschedule, you will get a warning that you've exceeded that date, and there's a start flag gap.
Yeah.
And there's I had some other values here that I was going to talk about. So there's other, so we've got a, I thought we had a way of showing that a value. I suppose that's just a float, isn't it? And what it does, it truncates the float of any activity that it's on.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
So it makes it reduces the amount of float that an activity has, but an activity can continue after that. I can't hear myself talk. So I'm going to mute you. So on your GoToMeeting control panel, there's a way that you can send me messages, but it's so noisy where you are, I can't hear myself talk.
Yeah, that's fine.
It's got a bit quieter now, so I'll try. So what it's doing is it's truncating the amount of float that activity has. So that float without that flag would go to the end. Would go to the end of the critical path. But if you wanted to constrain that float and say, well, we've got to have a sectional handover, and that's got to be done by the middle of that week, then that would act as a way of limiting the float on those activities.
Okay. So it's not something that, it's not the hard constraint then.
It's a soft.
It's just information.
It's a soft constraint, and so it's for information. And what a holding pin is a sort of start flag, but that moves with the activity. So if I have a start flag on this activity, and I have a holding pin on this activity, then if I move that, the reschedule will move it back to the flag date. If I move this, which has got the holding pin, the restraint moves with the activity. So
then what's the use?
Well, so a lot of people use that where you've got many unrestrained tasks, and they use that as a way of locating activities without putting logic links on for something like line of balance. So it's a rather specialist use. It moves with the activity. So rather than moving the flag, you move the constraint. But the help system has got a lot of information about these things. So so what were the other things that you might want to talk about? What I wanted to show you, there's some things that you can't get in P6. So we've got, so in the reschedule options, you may not be aware of it, but there's a thing called calculate the critical path drag. And if I have to do a full reschedule for that to have an effect, I thought. Don't know why that's not.
I will take 10 minutes. I know.
Yeah, okay. So it doesn't work with a restraint. So it's probably not going to be that useful for you, but what the critical drag factor is, and restraints destroy it, but it's telling you how much you would have to reduce each activity by so that it was no longer on the critical path. If you were looking to save some time, then you could reduce this activity only by 3 days, so it would become 0. This one you could reduce by 5 days. So what people often do is create a formula that says divide the duration by the drag factor, and if we sort on this column, then the ones with the highest value are the ones that you could reduce the most to reduce the length of the critical path. So it's which task should you concentrate on to reduce the critical path if you were looking to save some time. So those I just thought I'd throw in as an extra bit of information.
Yeah, in a bigger project like the one that I emailed you this afternoon,
Yeah.
where we have over 1,000 activities.
Yeah.
When I rescheduled the project, it crossed all the deadline and went by nearly 11 months out.
Yeah,
So
well,
my task is,
I'm not prepared to look at that project because it's so complicated.
so my task is to mitigate those 11 months and bring it back to the what it was before.
Yeah,
And
well,
then I was just trying to work out the float path, which is the culprit. There are critical chain. I can see the chain of critical activities. But is there any quicker way to identify those, the couple of culprit activities? You gave me a very nice example in the first place, just to take one